So I'm going to talk a little bit about information as a service for about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to talk about the work we've done with TK to put in place a digital passport for volunteering and explain a little bit about how that works. And I'm going to make sure I don't say the word blockchain. So I'm going to share my slides. If I can find them. I think it's those ones. So can everyone see? Obviously, I've lost you all, but I hope you can see my slides. So that was an interesting moment for me. That when you all started appearing, it told me that 2 people on the call might not be who they claim to be. So I thought I would just share that. And so before I go on to that slide, as I say, I'm going to introduce a bit about the organization, and then I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what do we mean by digital identity, and then talk you through how the digital volunteer passport works. But please shout out if you want to ask any questions. So as I say, we're 2 organizations. One of them is a consultancy business, and one of them is a development business. And our focus is on enabling information as a service. I would argue that information as a service is the most important service in the health and care world at the moment. When I tell you that 80% of every referral made to children's safeguarding currently doesn't meet threshold, therefore 80% of those individuals are being supported by information and advice rather than in a service. And if I take another example with carers, so there's a thing called a carers assessment, and nationally 74% of every assessment undertaken under a carers assessment results in information as a service. So getting information as a service right is critical. So getting a really good experience for people so that they get the right information about what exists in terms of services, and that they get the right advice that relates to their issues is absolutely essential. So what we do is we help organizations understand, how do I put the right model in place to make sure I've got accurate information, and what sort of technology do I need to make sure that works really well. So we got a number of products that we do, which you can see there, which are all about maintaining accurate information, ensuring that information is usable and visible to both frontline workers and also citizens, and then handling the sort of referral process where someone might say, look, I think I really need a statutory service. In terms of digital passport, that's really related to what we call assisted self-care. So what's assisted self-care? So as organizations, we are huge believers that we should be empowering intermediaries to help people help themselves. So people who are in need, one of the things that goes when you're in need is your ability to really make good decisions and look after yourself. What you often need is someone to help you, which could be a family member or friend, it could be a carer, it could be a frontline worker, or it can often be a volunteer. And really what people often need is a volunteer that helps them understand, well, what is it that's out there? What is the information sources and advice that I might be able to get hold of, and help me navigate to it and find it and be able to consume it and get the most out of it. So the purpose of the digital passport is really to ensure that we can put volunteers in touch with people, be confident that the person that we're putting in touch with someone really is who they say they are, and they can support that person. So just quickly, what do we mean by digital identity? So most of the Scandinavian countries, have had a sort of federated model of digital identity for probably a decade or longer. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is that whatever your online process that you're doing, all of your identity within that process tends to be driven by reference to your passport. Whereas in the UK, every single online transaction that you do, you set up a new account or a new digital identity to do it. So with your bank, Facebook, I've listed out 4 or 5, but we all know hundreds, don't we? I mean, I must literally have 30 or 40 online identities for different services and organizations that I've got a relationship with, each with a separate password, etc. These are all non-federated identities because they're all totally standalone. Whereas the shift now is towards the individual owning their own identity, having one digital identity, which is supported and enforced from their passport. And then it turns the other way around. So rather than the council, when you enter data into the council's website, for example, you have to tell them who you are, but it's them that owns your identity there. And what you're doing is saying, this is my username, my password. The shift is that the council would then always come back and ask for permission to check information that you are there, then the custodian of. So that's the sort of shift. Was that beep a question, by the way? No. It's, I don't know if any of you knew it, but so the government's pushing this model now of federated digital identity. So as from the end of this week, they've awarded the ability to a number of organizations who have the right to be a certified identity provider. So we as Digital Co-Production and TK are working alongside Yachty and the Post Office, who are one of those organizations that have been given permission to manage people's online identity. So as from the 1st of October, you can sign up with Yachty, and therefore you can go through a digital identity check so that all those 4 credentials about you, permissions about you, your UK identity check, your right to work in the UK, your right to rent in the UK, and your DBS and enhanced DBS, that can be a single federated model. So you can then say, well, I've done it once, and that can be reused. Okay, so people buy into Yachty as a trusted organization to know that you don't need to now have 8, 9, 10, 12 DBS checks, or you don't need to prove each time your right to be able to work in the UK. It's a federated model where the organization that wants to check that about you also goes through either Yachty or Freya or the other organizations that have the right to manage identity in that way. Okay, so I think that's relevant to know. So what we're doing in the volunteer world, therefore, is applying the same concept so that we can set up a digital identity, obviously using Yachty. And what that enables is that if I'm a volunteer, it simplifies that process for me then to be able to apply for opportunities in a federated way. So if I've got a relationship with, and I've forgotten who Flora works for already. Who do you work for, Flora, again?
Cardinal Hume Centre.
Cardinal Hume Centre. So if I've gone through the process once with the Cardinal Hume Centre, and Cardinal Hume are bought into the federated model along with Yachty, then any other volunteering organisation that has signed up to that federated model, I'm then a trusted volunteer across all of those organisations. Okay. But in terms of responding to opportunities, which is what we're focusing on here, there are 3. I'm simplifying this here. There are 3 course processes that are part of applying for a volunteering opportunity. One is that we are defining what the eligibility criteria are to be the volunteer in this instance. So whoever it is that's creating that opportunity specifies exactly what the eligibility criteria are. So specific training, and maybe an enhanced DBS, maybe it's gender specific, maybe there's a location criteria about they've got to live within 10 miles, maybe there's an age criteria as well, or it might be that there's a driving license required, etc. So a set of eligibility, there's an advert. So if I wanted to apply, I would then apply, and on applying, I'm then asked permission if I would share the information about me, which is held by the passport system, to verify the data as an eligibility check. So does Simon meet all those criteria? And if the answer is yes, I'm invited then to actually come along to an interview or whatever the next stage is. Okay. So that's the responding to opportunities. And the other bit of capability that's there is that if I then attend a placement as a volunteer, when I turn up, the person that I'm turning up to support can also check my identity. So either they can send a message into the central system. It'll send back a picture of me so they can look at the picture they get and check the person that's standing on the doorstep is the same as the picture. Or we can do it the other way around. I hold my phone, they can scan my QR code, and same thing. It then sends back a picture that says, is that the person stood in front of you? So in really simple terms, that's what we're putting in place. Here's some of the reasons we're doing it. Really, it's about creating a much more efficient and effective model for everybody. So quite a lot of volunteers, my own belief is, quite a lot of volunteers may be encouraged to become volunteers because we can deliver such a much more efficient process from their perspective. They can go through one set of checks with one of you as an organization against a federated set of checks. So certain, DBS has one, but perhaps levels of training that you all might sign up to. And it's an easier process for me then to volunteer. It's much easier for a hospital. Rather than currently, they might have to go to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 organizations and say, have you got any volunteers? They can go through one volunteer management system, one volunteer credential system to say, look, are there any volunteers out there that meet these requirements? So it should deliver a much slicker process for everyone. It should reduce the cost for everybody. And it should make it a much more inclusive opportunity as well. So go back to Flora's example. Someone still has to drive that DBS check, so it's going to happen once somewhere. But if someone's already been DBS checked somewhere, Flora, you won't have to do it again. If they signed up to Yachty already, it's a nothing process for you, because you would just send off a check. So you would ask for them to turn up. You would ask for them to send you the information. You'd send it off. It would come back and say, "Yep, that's exactly who they say they are." You can be confident now that that person is who they say they are. So just to go through a little bit more detail then, exactly how we're using it. So obviously the volunteer is signing up, they're being recruited, they're then being checked in terms of their identity to make sure that they are who they say they are, for them to become part of the federated capability. Then on the left-hand side, we've got a service user. So that service user could be a hospital that says they want people, or it could be a new service. So we're delivering a service across Blackburn, which we call the socially isolated and digitally excluded service, where if there's a new user comes on, says, look, I want someone to help me get more out of my mobile phone and help me find out what other groups are around me, they would enter the things that are of interest to them, their circumstances and their needs. We can then start a secure conversation between that volunteer and that service user online to chat about what else might you be interested in. Are you willing to travel up to 10 miles away? And then check against a set of information about local services which we hold in the directory to make recommendations back to that person. Well, look, here's some good groups that you might consider joining. And do you want me to come along to the first few with you as a volunteer? But I'm helping you understand how to get more out of the information on the internet about the groups that are out there and which ones may be appropriate for you. So just very quickly, just to focus on the word federated. Okay, so this is a really complex diagram, but if you look at the bottom left hand of the picture, I've got those bits of capability. So eligibility criteria, placement advert, and data set required. Okay, so those are the inputs into that process for any placement. Okay, and then on the bottom right hand side you see candidate list. So what happens is that if I apply for it, it then checks that I meet the criteria for that opportunity, and it then sends back my name included in a candidate list. And then whatever next step is in that process, is it an interview, or is it just, you're in and here's your first placement to go and talk to this person. So the federated digital volunteer recruitment system is that hexagon, the larger hexagon, and you can see a whole lot of other hexagons around it, one of which is TeamKinetic. But those are all existing organizations and systems that recruit volunteers. And what we're starting to do, so we've done with TK and doing with other organizations, is making sure that everyone buys into the federated model of sharing checks that we are doing, so that when someone applies once for something, it matches exactly to the checks and the requirements that all of those other organizations and systems would use in terms of their recruitment and their checking processes. So there's a little bit more detail in terms of how it happens. This is simply going to another place and saying we're using the same capability here around identities of volunteers, but placing that into that socially isolated and digitally excluded service. And again, all it's doing is the same thing, making sure that we're confident that the volunteer is who they say they are, and we can enable a secure conversation between that volunteer and whichever client we decide we want to introduce them to through that service. So I'm finally just going to show you a little bit about what the process looks like. So if you wanted to sign up to the Yachty wallet and the Yachty ID, which is obviously part of the UK verification scheme, then you simply go to find it on Google Play or on the App Store, and you're then invited to go through that process to use your passport. So the picture on the right hand side, you can see you take a photo of your passport, and it then verifies that that passport really is a passport that's accepted in the UK, exists, and then it makes sure that the picture of you that you take of yourself then matches to the picture on the passport for you to verify your identity. Once you've verified your identity, you've then got a digital identity wallet. And here, this is one which we've done in partnership with TK, and then that puts you into the opportunity to use it for the volunteers that you recruit. Okay, so each time you use it, you'd scan in with your QR code. It takes you to the front end for you then to check, are there any opportunities that I can sign up to? So you can see on there are some new opportunity suggestions that says, here's a great opportunity to volunteer. The organization A, B, and C are looking for people that might want to come and volunteer for them. So it's a simple process for people then to apply. And so they've chosen this one. This one's obviously to go and be a steward for Birmingham City. And you would then decide you want to do it. You would apply, prove who you are by reference again back to your Yachty wallet. This is obviously filling in the form for that particular application opportunity, and you're away. So this is an example of Marcus, who also works with us, and this is the information that's then held against his volunteer account. So there we go. I've rattled through trying to explain exactly what we've put in place. I'm going to escape and stop sharing my screen. And throw it back and invite to ask some questions. I think it's worth just saying, so the piece of work that we've done has been sponsored by the Lancashire and Healthcare System, a pretty big system across Lancashire and healthcare, population of 1.5 million, 6 foundation hospital trusts. And what they're trying to enable from their perspective is that opportunity for it to be, if you like, a sort of wholesale process to be able to get at volunteers, where they want one process to be able to talk to. I think there are 16 organisations across Lancashire and South Cumbria who are in the third sector and who go and recruit volunteers. So rather than going to 16 separate organisations to say, have you got a volunteer to meet this opportunity, they can go through this federated wholesale process to talk to all 16 and say, have any of you got anyone that meets these opportunities? So that's driven from the health side's perspective to make it a more seamless, a more seamless process for them, but B, one that they're more confident with regards to its security. So that's what's driving it. And then we've got a number of organizations from the volunteer provider side that are signing up, therefore, to recruit to that federated model and to enable people, therefore, to be part of that wholesale model to apply for opportunities right the way across the health system. So I think we've got 15 minutes left until the end of the session officially, haven't we? So I'm happy to take any more questions, explain a little bit more. I'll make sure, Rosie, I don't use the word blockchain. So fire away.
I had a question that I popped in the chat. Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
checking if it's actually been answered or not. Yeah. When you were talking about the model with the post office and such, this whole model, is that and the right to work checks, is that UK wide, or is that at the moment regulated in England?
Is it Rosie, that's too good a question for me.
So we're up in, I'm from Historic Environment Scotland, so we're national public agency in Scotland, and I'm just wondering at the moment. So we work with TeamKinetic as well with the Make Your Mark volunteering participation campaign, and we have a lot of members signing up to TeamKinetic, which we fund for the free membership. But we're looking at the enterprise models as well, and I'm just wondering if one of the benefits of the enterprise model, obviously, is that you're getting in on the early action of this under development, but I'm just wondering.
I don't know. All I can say, Rosie, is that the identity scheme is owned by DCMS, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, or because they're in charge of digital as well. So if DCMS is the Scottish agency for digital, then I would suggest it probably does apply to Scotland. Whereas if you have a separate, it's all to do with what Scotland has.
I've just done a quick Google and it says Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, gov.uk. So it looks like it might be UK wide. Anyway, that's answered my question. So I need to just do a bit of homework on that. Thank you. I
mean, I think it will be UK wide. The passport is a UK wide thing. There's no different passport, obviously, in Scotland. So I would think it would be UK wide, Rosie, but it's a good question. You're right. It's worth just checking it out.
It is. I'm going to come in on your question as well, Rosie. It is a good question. I'm over here in Northern Ireland in Belfast, so I know where you're coming from, Rosie, because we don't use DBS. We use our own separate system, Access NI, and I know Scotland has had its own system in terms of those specific checks. So I don't know if it might be something that might pose.
And right to work in the UK is right to work in the UK and not right to work in England. So some of them might be the same, some might be different, but I think it's definitely worth just finding out the answer.
Yeah, just the DBS one just might be a wee bit clunky, maybe.
Yeah, because what we don't have is a beautiful list of devolved topics that we can just quickly dip in and out of, and that's really, in essence, what we need. And I assume that's the same with yourself, Helen.
Yeah. My question, Simon, was just about have you tested the appetite for this with volunteers? And I suppose I'm trying to think around, we're quite new to TK. I work in the museums and we're about to launch our digital platform with our volunteers, and we're really looking forward to that. So it's about how would something like Yachty and this process work with our existing TK platforms? So would we be asking volunteers to sign up to two separate digital platforms or go through two separate systems in terms of the recruitment?
No, it's federated. You're looking to align them. You don't want them to be separate, and that's the difficult bit, is making sure that what everyone's doing, they're comfortable, matches similar requirements to everyone else. So if the standard is you've got to do these 7 things, if you want to do 7 more, that's fine. So you can go above and beyond the standards, but it will be a seamless process in terms of your use of TK, but it's obviously an option. So people don't have to sign up for it to own, this is not about you've got to do it digitally. This is if you want to manage your identity digitally, you can, but you don't have to.
So Helen, what we've been doing is I don't know if you've noticed, when people log in, they can use Facebook to log in or Google to log in and start their registration process. It's a similar sort of idea. So they can start their registration process using Yoti to identify themselves, and we can get certain information out of the passport at that point, like their email address and things. And then we know they've got a Yoti passport. So at other points in the application, we can say, oh, well, this volunteer's got a Yoti passport, and you could maybe interrogate that passport and ask for details about their DBS or whatever they might have in that passport, and then they give permission on their side. So the idea is that they've already got Yoti, they've used it somewhere else. If they're not already installed, I mean, you could always promote it and get them to use Yoti, but the idea is that they're already in there and they've already got information in Yoti, and they use it to register with you.
And just to answer the first question, the answer is what you think it's going to be, really, is that 40% were pretty adamant they don't want to do it, because they're nervous about trusting digital, and then 40% were adamant they do want to do it, and 20%, well, I probably will do it. That tends to be, when we looked at it first, those are the results, and every time I chat to anyone informally, it tends to be a similar sort of sets of views. But it's the same as everything, isn't it? I bet 90% of the people on this call have a bank app, but there's probably one or two on the call that don't, because they don't want to have a bank app. So it's just, this is not about shifting everyone to digital. It's about opening a new process for people that maybe would prefer to do it that way. I had an interesting workshop about 2 or 3 weeks ago with some 70 and 80-year-olds, and in the middle of it, it was at an Age UK office. Someone knocked on the door and came in and said, "Oh, Jane, just to remind you that you've got your podiatry session tomorrow at 2 o'clock." And the lady walked out, and Jane, who's 82, rolled her eyes. And I said, "What's all that about?" She said, "I get text reminders from the hospital, from my GP, from my insurance company. Why does Age UK think that they need me to physically be told about the fact?" So, some people that are well into their 80s want to work in a more digital way, and sometimes we're holding them back from that and relying still on a slightly more manual process when some of them are ready to go. I think someone else put their hand up to ask a question.
Yes, Simon, I did. I've got a couple of questions. So is Yoti, I suppose, the main platform for digital identities? Like, could a volunteer come to me and say, well, actually, I've got a digital identity on, this platform, and it's like a different platform?
Yes, they can. I confess I don't know the answer to this from your perspective, Rolf, but there are 6 identity providers that the UK has given permission to be managers, to be certified to manage identity in this way, and Yoti is one of them. Freya is another one. I can't remember who the other ones are, if I'm honest. But we've partnered up initially with Yoti, but it's easy to shift to use others because it's all based on the same standards of the way things interoperate. So it's easy for TK and for DCP to also allow other digital identity wallets to be used, but we haven't done it yet. But if someone said we need to make some of these other wallets work, I think it will be a very quick process for us to switch them on.
And obviously this only really works if you can drive people to sign up for these, digital identities. So who's driving that, and what's the role of organizations to, perhaps encourage people to do that?
Good question. So here it's been driven, in Lancashire, it's being driven by the Lancashire Health System, but in this project only. So with the partners that are in the project, we're being asked to go and recruit people and encourage people to do it. But there's another question there, isn't there? Which is, at what point is the Integrated Care Board, in other words, the partnership between the councils and the health system, going to decide that they want to invite residents generally to create a digital identity? and that's certainly not on the radar yet. So it's bottom up, if you know what I mean. It would in different areas, it'll be very much a local project that will be thinking about it. But if I just say again, I bet 75% of hospital trusts in the country are thinking about digital identity. So if you go back to, do you all remember the Good Sam app? You'll all know about the Good Sam app, and everyone signed up to be a Good Samaritan on a Good Sam app, and it didn't go anywhere. And it didn't go anywhere because there were I forget how many. Does anyone know what it was? There were millions of people signed up to Good Sam app, but they barely used it at all because there was no proof of who the identity was of the person that had volunteered. So there was a massive push 2 years ago after that, to say how to create digital identities. So lots of these projects have kicked off across the country, and the one in Lancashire is one of about 6 or 7 we know of that are trialing this capability to make sure we can put this in place and start to roll it out. So I think whichever area you work in, I think you will find that some of these conversations are happening, and it's worth getting involved in them, which is not and TK is ready to be able to work with whichever identity model, whichever identity provider is looking to implement it. So I'm sure if you came across projects and came back to us, so TK and us would be willing to come forward and say, well, how can we help you? How can we help that locality drive it forward?
So right now, if somebody comes to me and they want to volunteer and I have to do like a DBS check for them, I would encourage them to sign up to the update service. Yeah. Is that something that you want, organizations to do, but say, have you thought about, setting up a digital identity with Yoti? Yeah, I wouldn't do it yet, because there's probably very few people that are putting the placements on the other end in a joined up digital way that are going to use the other end of it, if you know what I mean. So there's no point you getting volunteers ready to go through a digital process if the hospital trust you're working with or the councils you're working with aren't also wanting to make that work in a joined up digital manner. So it needs both. It needs the market to work. It needs the volunteers and the placements to both decide they're going to work in a more joined up way. But if you create lots of placements yourselves, then certainly as one organization we can help make sure that all of the people that you work with sign up to Yoti. It becomes a digital process, and you can put that in place.
The DBS partner that TK are working with to try and bring this into the app, First Advantage, they use a very similar system at the start of that process to get the DBS sorted. So they have an identity check, which is based around Yoti. Oh, is it Freya? I can't remember which one it is. Right. But it's essentially the same idea. They have to download the app first, and then they verify their identity using their passport. RFID scans a passport and takes photos of them and all that sort of stuff before it gets onto the DBS stage. And people are more aware of this sort of system now. I mean, you might have come across it previously when you're doing things and you look into ID and people have checked, like when you open a bank account with Starling, for instance. So I think people are getting more used to this digital identification sort of process and idea, and are less maybe cautious about it than they were 10 years ago. This whole scanning of passports and their faces and things, and the fact that we have biometric passports now. So yeah, it is starting to spread, that use outside of this case as well.
And I think if you believe in your organization that it's something that you want, there's value to you in accelerating it, then I think you need to have a conversation probably with TK or with us to understand what it is that the opportunity is, for us to make sure that the right stakeholders are around the table to make it work. But the fact that the whole mechanism goes live on the 1st of October, it's going to grow in the next 6 to 9 months, I think, relatively significantly, with more people being aware of it. I guess it's just important to say that, you know, digital identity is one thing. You know, a wallet, a digital wallet that knows who you are and identifies you, and then using it in a volunteer management placement process is just one use of it. But there are lots of others.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've got a minute left, so this is all been recorded, and I can obviously share the slides with people. And if you've got any other questions afterwards, then get in touch with either with TK or through TK. Go to TK, and they'll come to us if we're the right organisation to support the conversation.
Okay.
I hope that was interesting and enlightening and helpful, and I hope the rest of the day goes well as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.